value from success, growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website taxpayer.com. Best of the season, Kris.
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Well, we always talk about getting a lump of coal in our Christmas stockings, but how about taking that coal out and just leaving a big carbon tax bill? Is that what Canadians are facing from the Trudeau government?
Yes, they are, unfortunately, and I was really shocked by it. It was more than I was even expecting him to increase it by. And we need to remember that before the last election, and during the last election, both the Prime Minister and the at the time Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, repeated up and down, over and over, that they had no plans, no intentions of increasing the carbon tax federally past the $50 per ton benchmark. Well, did they ever more than triple that? It is now going to be $170 a ton by the year 2030. And if you think that's a long ways off, you're probably not old enough. As you get older, you realize that time flies. So this decade will be gone before we know it, and we'll all be saddled with this new carbon tax, this extremely high carbon tax. And to break it down into terms we can understand, that works out to 37.5 cents per liter of gasoline. If you're filling a current minivan, like just your Dodge Grand Caravan, very popular, that's going to cost you $27 extra to fill it, just in the carbon tax. If you're filling your average light-duty pickup truck, $45 extra just in the carbon tax. So this is mega expensive.
So, I mean, I have this image. We live in the coldest country on the planet. We're the second biggest. Distances between Canadian communities, even between where you live and work, are tremendous. How are we supposed to afford to heat our homes? Because this tax will go if you're using natural gas or heating oil, right? Yeah, absolutely. People don't get an exemption for heating oil, which is why, interestingly, even though the Atlantic provinces keep on voting for him, the Atlantic provinces have sent a joint letter to Prime Minister Trudeau saying, we can't afford this, because a huge chunk of Maritimers are on heating oil for their fuel, so they can stay warm and not freeze to death and not have their pipes burst in their homes. And you said it right. It's cold here about 7 months of the year. It is darn cold. It's not hospitable without proper heating in your home. And so, yeah, this carbon tax is going to be tacked onto that as well. To give you a BC example, so I put out the call a few months ago asking residents to send me copies of their natural gas bill, because I wanted to find out, because I don't have natural gas, I wanted to find out how much a carbon tax was typically per month. And I was surprised to see that in each case where these folks sent me copies of their bills, and I blotted out their names, the carbon tax cost more than the actual fuel used. So a gentleman in Gibson, average 3-bedroom home, keep in mind it's pretty mild there, kind of rainy, not exactly a really, really cold spot. He used $27 worth of natural gas. His carbon tax bill for that 1 month in January was $35. If we fast forward to the year 2030, by the time we have a carbon tax of $170 a ton, it's going to cost that gentleman about $150 more just in the carbon tax for that 1 month. Now just imagine the colder places across Canada who are using not only natural gas, as you pointed out rightly, but things like heating oil. And it's just going to get more and more expensive. Kris, up until about 3 years ago, natural gas was considered a very clean, affordable fuel to use, and then all of a sudden it became demonized along with heavy crude and coal. Why the change, and is it just pure propaganda? Because I'd much rather have a a power plant next to me that's using natural gas rather than coal or diesel fuel.
Sure. And anybody who studies different fuel sources will know that compared to other fuel sources, natural gas is a very clean, very good one. That is why we are exporting it to places like India and hopefully China, depending on what happens there. And you're right. I mean, those of us who are old enough to remember all those commercials that came out, usually from the government, paid for by taxpayers and tax dollars, saying, the clean burning blue flame, make the switch. It's one of the reasons why BC Ferries runs partially on natural gas. A lot of people, including rec centers and schools and hospitals, switched to natural gas because it is cleaner and it's abundant and it's affordable and it's processed here in Canada, where we have the highest labor regulations and standards and the best environmental standards in the world. And now, for some reason, I would say extremely ideological reasons, some activists have turned on it. And unfortunately, some of those activists happen to be at city halls across Canada. And that's where a lot of these weird ideas start. They actually start in city halls. And then they percolate and bubble up to the provincial level, and then they percolate and bubble up to the federal level. But a lot of those dumb ideas start at city halls.
Well, I mean, I'm hearing in Regina now they're going to spend millions on bike paths. I never had a problem cycling around Regina in 1980. It's flat, and you can go anywhere you want on a side street to avoid traffic. And yet in a city where there's 9 months of winter and 3 months of poor skating, they're going to expend millions and millions of dollars in a place where those cycles are going to be useless most of the year.
Sure. And this is the thing, is where it gets down to ideology. And just straight up, I loved riding my bike. I lived in Ottawa for around 15 years. I was a cyclist. I walked most places but took my bike to work. I was lucky enough to live mostly downtown. I know the vast majority of people can't do that. And so I was able to bike there. There's a way of doing it where you can accommodate cyclists on the quieter streets and have the thoroughfares for them to go back and forth and not clog up your main arteries. There is a way to make it work between both bicycles and cars, and that's fine if people want to bike. It's good for you. It's good for the environment. You save money if you're able to do that. Again, for the folks who can't and must drive their cars, they deserve to have a good thoroughfare and artery to their destination too. And this is where it starts to get unfair. You start wondering, are you guys putting these bike lanes in the most inconvenient places on purpose? Are you trying to frustrate people who are trying to get from A to B or maybe C in between in their vehicles? Because one could easily start thinking so. Just speaking personally, I had to go downtown Vancouver on Sunday afternoon thinking it would be quieter. I absolutely had to. So I drove downtown Vancouver just as the sun had set. It was almost impossible to get anywhere. Every single street had lane reductions. It had construction that had just been left there. It had new bike lanes shoved in somewhere. It was unbelievably maddening. And again, it was a Sunday afternoon. It was supposed to be light traffic. I don't know how folks get around in downtown with all of these barriers being put up in their way. Again, it feels like an attack on people for just using vehicles. But on the issue of this carbon tax, man, you're right. People are spaced out. They live quite often far away from their work. They live far away from each other. We're a gigantic, cold country. We are not some densely populated European city in a warm climate. This is going to be very bad for us.
If you live in a rural community, public transit is not an option.
No, it's non-existent for a lot of people in rural communities and small towns. And again, not everybody can use transit. Some can. That's great. Not everybody can. Some of us need to get to work. We need to bring tools. We need to bring supplies. We need to make several stops. We need to get there within a 3-hour window. It just isn't functional for some folks.
What about the cost of food? You have to plant it, harvest it,
Yes.
ship it.
This is the really surprising thing. I was just sent a bill, actually, a copy of a bill, somebody else's bill. They showed it to me online. And he said that it was a carbon tax that was placed on some form of his irrigation that he needs for his crops. And I asked him, I haven't found out yet, what incurs a carbon tax for a farmer, a producer, when you're irrigating. Who knows? It could be run on natural gas. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the mechanism. It was $18,000. That's mind-blowing. And some producers use natural gas to dry their grain and their seed and their crop. And so that not only increases the cost of the basics, like, flour and bread and stuff. Keep in mind that livestock eat that feed, so the price of meat will go up as well. This is why when we increase the carbon tax, people say that it's a tax on everything, because it really is.
Well, also you have a lot of animals that have to be kept indoors to raise them. Chickens and, I know hogs prefer to be indoors in the colder weather. That means your eggs and chicken and bacon are going to cost more.
Absolutely. All these animals need shelter and housing while they're with us. It's part of the livestock industry. This is how it functions. And again, I think this is why some folks who I'm charitably trying to imagine are well-meaning, who live, maybe they were born and raised in really hyper-urban environments, and they don't think about where the food comes from, where the supplies come from, where the tradespeople live, where all of those services that seem to be at their door and on a delivery app actually originate. And where those things actually originate are very fuel-intensive, costly places. And they just jacked up the costs immeasurably, and like you said, including on keeping things like your chicken barn warm. And so this is the issue you get to. It's like, okay, we're going to jack up the carbon tax on everything from diesel to gasoline to natural gas. What do you want people to do? Oh, okay, they can switch to electric. Do people know how much it costs to heat your home with electric heat? It's outrageously expensive. And then they'll jump to the next foot and they'll say, oh, I'll put in a heat pump. Okay, heat pumps only work to a certain degree of temperature. Not all of us live right down on the Sunshine Coast. What are you going to do then? And also, if they're trying to get rid of gas and oil, if everybody buys an electric car and plugs into the grid, what's going to happen? Do we have the capacity for that? Do we have the power?
We'll have more with Kris Sims when we get into her naughty and nice list for the season.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, the naughty list, the politicians, the government services that disappointed you by charging too much or not explaining where the money went or just wasting it. I think of Vancouver City Hall and their designer chairs that were ordered during the pandemic.
Yeah, that really blew a lot of people's minds, and it was something that they could really visualize because so many of us are sitting at home, working from home, often in chairs that we hadn't before. They're, our dining room chairs, our regular office chairs, our couches, you name it. And here in the middle of the pandemic, they turned around and, kudos to Global. They happened to be Johnny on the spot and had their video camera there and noticed from afar that these were Herman Miller chairs. Now, for people who aren't familiar with that is a very famous international designer of office furniture. Now, that sounds nerdy, and it is, but there's obviously high levels of sophistication in every realm. This gentleman happens to be a highly sophisticated designer of office furniture, and his office furniture sells for thousands of dollars. Just one of these office chairs that these bureaucrats were buying on our dime, on Vancouver taxpayers' dime, was around $1,500. One of them. And they're rolling them off of this truck. And they did so, as you point out, in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of this lockdown, when people are out of work. They actually spent more than $300,000 renovating their offices. And what gets me, and cheeses me off, is that they won't tell us who got the chairs. We've put in access to information requests or freedom of information requests. We don't know yet whose tuchus is sitting in which chair. So that's definitely on the naughty list. Very similar on the naughty list, the Public Health Agency. The investigation is ongoing, so we don't know the details yet. But a whistleblower told reporters that the Public Health Agency, which is in Vancouver, was in the middle of the pandemic with all of these highfalutin, well-paid managers, some of them making over $200,000 or $300,000 a year. In March and April, they were ordering themselves in lunch and dinner on taxpayers' dime. And this lunch and dinner was including things like avocado toast, and it's almost a cliche, but it was true. A fancy type of salad that I can't pronounce, but was expensive, and, steak dinners, all on taxpayers' dimes. And that was costing tens of thousands of dollars for that catering service. And more seriously, and more importantly, the whistleblower alleges that millions of dollars, were spent on on mask orders, and the orders themselves were so faulty that nobody could use them. So there's a huge investigation ongoing into that right now. So that definitely landed them on the naughty list this year.
Canada was holding military exercises with China, a very potential enemy. Is that a waste of taxpayer money?
We're actually looking into that to find out what was spent on that element, because of course we try to stay out of the political realm of it, but we look at the dollars and cents, and we're going to try to find out. Apparently, a lot of that information was accidentally obtained. We don't know if it was a whistleblower or a mistake through the Freedom of Information Office in Ottawa, coming out of the national level, but we're going to try to find out, because that's a very valid question.
We'll take a look at some of the politicians who did nice things with your tax money next.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims on your nice list, and I can see you partying with Santa most years, not this year. On the nice list, the politicians who made it easier for small business to do some business during the time of a virus crisis.
Yes, we want to give kudos to all of especially those local governments who, in the middle of this terrible mess, and it really has been a terrible mess. I think I speak for everybody when I say I sure hope next year is better for everybody. We want to give kudos to all those small towns, all those local city councils who, in the springtime especially, when they knew restaurants and pubs needed some leeway, removed the barriers to do things like getting outdoor patios. It was the automatic, yes, build a patio, and if there is a problem, somebody will call it in. So do the reverse billing almost. Go ahead and you have permission, right? And if there's a problem, we'll follow up, rather than this go through 10 layers of red tape and wait several months to get a patio license. So that was very good. There are several cities and towns throughout British Columbia that did so. So kudos to them. Government also quickly moved and allowed for alcohol delivery with food and takeout with food. And that's very important because restaurants actually depend a lot on alcohol sales, not tons of the actual just sitting there drinking, but to go along with the food, a big portion of their sales comes from alcohol. The last I saw it was between 30 and 40% of their bottom line depended on that. So again, quickly, that was a major regulation change. They flipped quickly, and they allowed for people to both take it out at the door and to have it delivered to them. So kudos to them. It isn't very often that government moves quickly, and they did. So we wanted to give credit where it's due. That was good.
Doug Ford in Ontario also did a nice thing when he capped the fees they can charge on food deliveries.
Yeah, that was interesting, eh? Usually we try to let, the market deal with that and companies deal with that, but it's nice to see. What's also nice to see as an alternative is that if you don't want to see government stepping in and putting in caps or doing things like that, because we want to, see them get out of the way more than they jump in the way, is sometimes you'll see a not-for-profit or a local group start one. I know, for example, that several restaurants in Vancouver all teamed up, and they all put in their own little bit of money to create their own app, and that way the food delivery cost was at cost. So that way it wasn't costing the restaurant anymore, and it wasn't costing the person who was doing the ordering anymore. It was actually built into their costs, and it wasn't really cutting into their bottom line. So there's always a good alternative.
Also, you'd like to throw cheers towards Burnaby City Council.
Yes. It was something I don't think got enough press, and again, a lot of people, in fact, most people I know, have had salary reductions. We've had salary reductions here since, I think, February or March. Most people in the private sector have. Unfortunately, politicians quite often haven't bothered. They haven't had their salary reduced, they haven't taken pay cuts, and some of them have even jacked up taxes. So there's a big disconnect between government workers and politicians and the rest of us. So we're really not all in this together. That being said, there was an exception in Burnaby Council. They reduced their pay by 10%, and then they took that 10%, according to these reports locally, and donated it to a local charity that provides meals for senior citizens. That's good, and we always want to give out credit where it's due, and that was definitely a huge thumbs up when we read that.
I'm just reading a note here. In the last 7 days, the Prime Minister has refused to increase the federal share of healthcare funding, increase the carbon tax, and is spending $485 million to other countries.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that money be kept home during the time of a crisis when we have like a record federal, not just deficit, but debt?
Yeah, it can't be stressed enough how bad this is. And further, he broke a promise. He vowed, he promised, he said he would not increase the carbon tax past $50, and then he just turned around and obliterated that promise, and he's doing it anyway. And he jacked up the carbon tax during COVID. And to give a little small kudos, I'm not super happy with him, but still where it's due, Premier John Horgan did not. So we invented this carbon tax mess here in BC. We know that. It was supposed to go up in April, but he didn't. The Premier froze it. And that's important, because by contrast, the Prime Minister didn't. He jacked up his federal carbon tax. And so, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is at the very, very top of our naughty list. He is, they have spent, in the last couple of years, will blow people's minds. The federal government in the last couple of years has put on more debt than all previous governments combined ever. It's staggering. We are going to tip over the $1 trillion mark. That is a 1 with 12 zeros after it. It is a shocking amount of debt. So Prime Minister Trudeau, the budget certainly didn't balance itself, needless to say. He doesn't seem to have a grasp at all on how to balance any budget or on finances, and he's definitely at the top of our naughty list for that.
Kris, you're at the top of my nice list.
Oh, thank you.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Where can people go, Kris, if they'd like to address some of the concerns you talked about today?
We always love to hear from people, and we have a toolkit on our website for people to take their own action. No matter who you vote for, it's always good to get engaged in politics and to push back on things you don't like. They can go to our website, taxpayer.com.
Kris, best of the season.
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everybody.
If you have any questions for Kris, you can also send them to us at info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Best of the holidays.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.